Hi, I'm Justin Barrett. I'm president of Blueprint 1543. I'm a psychological scientist and a former university professor. If you value this content, please like and subscribe. In this episode, I want to raise a question about our holiday partying. I'm recording this around the holidays where we're going to, if you're like most people, we're going to have Christmas parties, Thanksgiving parties, other kinds of end-of-year celebrations. And for many people, that is an opportunity to, drink adult beverages, alcoholic beverages, or not. So the question I want to kick around is, what is really the sort of biblical evidence for whether we should be imbibing at any rate? And I'm going to just sort of spill the beans on what my sort of conclusion is right out of the gate. And that is that the case against drunkenness is very strong in the Bible. The case against teetotaling, that is not drinking any alcohol at all, is non-existent. That is not a biblical position as a general rule of thumb. And I want to be very careful here because, of course, different people have different temperaments, physiological temperaments when it comes to alcohol. Some people have a strong natural predisposition toward alcoholism and becoming addicted to alcohol and its abuse. And for such people, of course, it is entirely prudent to avoid alcohol entirely. And if they have reason to think that maybe their children or their parents or other people who share their genetic lineage also have such a predisposition, then of course it would be prudent of them to share that information with those people so that they likewise can avoid getting themselves caught up in a trap of alcoholism. Alcohol is not something to mess around with in that regard, right? It damages lots of people's health, their lives, their wealth, and their families can be destroyed through the abuse of alcohol. And so it's not a surprise at all that biblical wisdom teaches against drunkenness. It's so easy to find evidence against this in the Bible that I'm not even going to talk about it very much here. But what I do want to talk about is the sort of extreme opposite position, which is to say drinking any alcohol at all is forbidden in the Bible. Well, frankly, it's a preposterous claim. The case for consumption of at least some alcohol being permissible for at least some people under some conditions, or it even being good in some contexts, is very strong. And we can start with Jesus' own example. Good place to start is what is commonly referred to as his first miracle. Jesus made wine from water for a wedding. You can read about this in the Gospel of John, chapter 2. Jesus makes apparently wine from water and shares it with guests at the wedding feast. It's regarded as very good wine, and the party keeps on going. Jesus, his first miracle is kind of serving as a bartender, which is very strange. If alcohol is always everywhere a bad thing. Second, Jesus was accused by his opponents of being a drunkard, he and his disciples. For example, check out Luke chapter 7, verse 34. Why? Because he did not completely abstain from alcohol like John the Baptist did. A contrast is sometimes drawn. John the Baptist didn't drink alcohol because of the kind of religious sect he was identifying with. His vows kept him abstaining. But Jesus was accused of being a drunkard because he and his disciples apparently drank alcohol. And in the Last Supper, which then foreshadows the central sacrament in the Christian tradition, Holy Communion it's sometimes called, or the Eucharist, Jesus shares wine with his disciples. And then he uses that image of wine and bread as a central ritual, a central image in the Christian faith. Jesus at that time also said that he would drink wine in the new kingdom of God. Mark chapter 14, verse 25. Jesus gives lots of examples from his own life and his own teaching about alcohol, in this case, wine, sometimes. But if Jesus' own examples aren't enough, it's easy to find Old Testament and New Testament examples of moderate wine use being praised as a good thing. For instance, Psalm 104. It's a psalm of praise to God, and in one of the praises includes that God has provided us with wine that makes man's heart glad. That's something to praise God for. Isaiah chapter 25, verse 6 envisions a future banquet for all of God's people, prepared by God. And at that banquet, at least the imagery here includes aged wine, meat, and then refined aged wine. Wine shows up twice in the same verse. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 23, Paul recommends explicitly to Timothy to stop drinking only water, but start drinking a little bit of wine for the sake of his stomach. He seems to think it's a health benefit if Timothy drinks a little bit of wine here. So some wine, in some cases, seems to be not only tolerable, but celebrated in the Bible itself. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Miracles, C.S. Lewis, famous Christian writer, Oxford professor, in his book, Miracles, makes an interesting observation about that first miracle. He classifies miracles in a couple of different ways, and I'll just read from here. He says, let us turn to our classification, and firstly to miracles of fertility. That's the first category that Lewis has identified here. The earliest of these miracles, that is, was the conversion of water into wine at the wedding feast in Cana. This miracle proclaims that the God of all wine is present. The vine is one of the blessings sent by Yahweh. He is the reality behind the false god, Bacchus, who was the Roman god of wine. Every year, as part of the natural order, God makes wine. He does so by creating a vegetable organism that can turn water, soil, and sunlight into a juice, which will, under proper conditions, become wine. Thus, in a certain sense, he, that is God, constantly turns water into wine. For wine, like all drinks, is but water modified. 1 year only, God, now incarnate, that's Jesus, short-circuits the process, makes wine in a moment, uses earthenware jars instead of vegetable fibers to hold the water, but uses them to do what he is always doing. The miracle consists in the shortcut, but the event to which it leads is the usual one. Lewis is going out at length here because he's making the point that there is some continuity between Jesus's miracles and what God already does. And so that Jesus creating wine is sort of a natural extension done in a very spectacular way of something that God just is always doing. I find this a really interesting reflection because that dovetails, it resonates a little bit with what some of the scientific sort of perspectives on the sort of production of wine also seem to suggest. I'm taking this from a book called The School of Booze by Jane Payton. In the section on wine, she writes, unlike most other alcoholic drinks, which need human interaction, wine could make itself. That little grape is self-sufficient with a sack of sugar on the inside and outside on the skin, a colony of yeast just waiting to drill through the membrane and consume the delicious juice to deliver alcohol through fermentation. And then there's further explanation in the book and throughout. But the point is that the yeast that is required to ferment the sugars, convert those sugars into alcohol, in the case of winemaking, appears on the skin of the grape. It's almost the case that because of that close physical proximity of the yeast to the sugars, grapes are going to ferment themselves. They're going to make wine. For this reason, wine, alcohol made from grapes, is probably almost an inevitable product of just having grapes around. And so any society, ancient society that had grapes around would discover, given very little time and effort, wine, some kind of alcoholic beverage there. Though it is suggested that maybe the oldest form of alcohol might have been actually honey that is fermented in water. Mead is an example of such an alcohol. The point I'm making here is that some alcohol appears to be sort of a natural production of just the way things are out there in the world. They're going to result, and so humans, as well as other animals, are at some point going to imbibe alcohol. It sort of backs up what Lewis was trying to suggest in the book Miracles. But it's the important point here is that this pushes against a common reinterpretation that folks often make who are from especially Christian traditions who want to say that no alcohol should ever be consumed ever by anyone, that it's completely forbidden. Given all of that biblical evidence that I quickly laid out about how, well, it sure looks like Jesus not only made wine, but he shared it with his disciples, they will sometimes retort to something like, well, that wasn't really alcohol. That was grape juice. That's just our mistranslation of the word. My point that I'm sharing about the inevitability of wine creation is in a society where there is not any refrigeration, where they grow vines, they are producing wine, alcoholic wine. If you had a vat of grape juice sitting around, it would ferment itself. You have to work by pasteurizing it, killing the yeast, and then refrigerating it or preserving it under special sort of containment sort of devices like we do with glass jars these days in order for it not to turn into wine. So biblically, surely they were talking about wine, not just for the scientific reasons, but for the textual reasons. I mean, how could it be that Jesus is being accused of being a drunkard if he was just drinking grape juice? That's just silly. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I'm going to leave you hanging a little bit here, and I will pick up this topic again in a second video to be released shortly. Thanks for joining me.